On a day where the Congress debates funding for both domestic issues and the war in Iraq, I had the opportunity to sit down with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas. I saw you on Bill Maher a couple weeks ago, and I noticed Democrat from Texas. And I'm thinking to myself, a black woman who's a progressive Democrat, not what we think of when we think Texas. How are you elected in Texas?
Stay principled and really strongly committed to your values. And I think people really don't know Texans. We are the state of Ann Richards, Ralph Yarborough, and certainly Lyndon Baines Johnson. Short of the Vietnam War, was one of the greatest social architects of changing the mindset of America.
Some of the stuff you're doing here on the home front, you've done a lot of work with the GINA 6 and towards hate crime legislation. What's going on right now here on the Hill when it comes to hate crime legislation?
Well, that's interesting that question would be posed, because even today I've raised the question as to whether or not we have been effective as a nation in addressing the question that maybe does not appeal to 90% of those in this country, but it certainly appeals for at least 50%, and that is the protection of civil rights. And frankly, I think the country is going backwards. I'm particularly saddened by that. We've found that the hanging nooses have become the new burning cross. It's convenient. It is non-inflammatory in terms of actual fire. It can be carried in your suitcase or your lunch bag. And it is being utilized in workplaces. It's being utilized in schools. And frankly, the jurisdictions, the powers to be, are ignoring it. And frankly, I believe that is by way of the tone being set by this administration, and certainly a failed Department of Justice, because civil rights impacts all races. Someone can be discriminated against because they're in a group of which they happen to be a minority. And so it is not necessarily an issue for African Americans. It is a religious issue. You could either be Jewish or Muslim or any other faith. It is an issue of discriminating against someone who is in the minority or is being intimidated. And GINA 6 is the prime example. We had a Department of Justice that had its lights turned off and its doors closed. We had a U.S. attorney that failed to intervene in the local jurisdictions to indicate to them that prosecuting a schoolyard fight of mostly African-American boys, of African-American boys, albeit that we did not condone the fight, and doing nothing to those who hung the noose or who prided themselves in an all-white tree, was frankly wrong, misdirected, and discriminatory. And the fact that hate crimes was not found some basis of bringing in the federal government, or the violation of the civil rights of those youngsters, Michael Bell and others who are now still under indictment, is a deep, deep failing. We have found that the percentage of enforcement of civil rights and hate crimes has drastically decreased under this administration, under the Bush administration. But when you don't protect people's civil rights, it is a chemistry, it is a formula for disruption, it is a formula for conflict, and it is a formula for hurting communities and keeping them from reaching their promise.
What I want to talk to you about is Iraq. Now, today alone, we're going to be talking about more money for Iraq. And a lot of people on the Hill have said we're not spending one more cent. What exactly is going on with Iraq and the spending on it?
What we will be debating today brings us to some degree of a framework. And we already know that the president's going to veto it, so we're obviously hitting a soft spot. It does have a time certain. It says that troops should be home by December of 2008.
But isn't that just, the wording on it's just a goal? Is that really getting the troops home?
What we are hoping, of course, and that is the dilemma. The dilemma is that the same people who say get the troops out, meaning those who we are trying to listen to, are the same people who will say, but don't forget to protect the troops. What this does is it frames the departure. Every language or language in there, or all the language in there, directs itself to framing the $50 billion, of which the president asked for $200 billion, plan to get out, safely redeploy, no staying there except for protecting assets or terrorist activities. It is intended to get the whole Congress, not just those of us who would vote right now to throw them out in terms of the administration's request for any money, but it is to get the whole Congress on record Mr. President, we demand that the troops come home, and you are to certify, one, that these troops have to be ready if anyone is sent to Iraq. We understand that would be impossible. And the other is that you have a December 2008 redeployment. And three, you must certify that you are doing the redeployment. Again, there is a measure of reality. What Sheila Jackson Lee and many others would like to have, no, no, and absolutely no, versus the mixed opinion of the vast numbers of Americans who believe that any shorting of troops is in essence disregarding their safety. So we're hoping to get to that point where it is an absolute no, and we mean no. But this framework that is going forward now, and I studied it, I'm troubled, and I've looked at the language, and I'm walking around with the language, and I'm still reading the language, to ensure that what is in the bill frankly confronts the president right where he cannot be confronted, which is, we have told you over and over again to redeploy. The American people want them to come home. Now we've demanded, by way of the vote coming out of the Senate and the House, that's the difference. We haven't been able to get a bill out of the Senate and the House that says this is when they should come home, this is what you need to certify. At the same time, a portion of my bill that I had offered that indicates that two things in my bill, the Military Success Act of 2007, which I'm going to continue to press, list all of the successes of the troops on the ground in Iraq. And we use Iraq because Afghanistan represents another question altogether. And it lists out the military successes like Fallujah, like taking Baghdad, and it says, based upon the resolution of 2002, which I did not vote for, all of the elements of that resolution has been achieved. Therefore, the war is over. We proclaim a military success. And when I say that the troops have done what they need to do, and we demand that they be brought home with ribbon, celebration, and a recognition of their success, the troops. And we ask for a $5,000 stipend, no questions asked, of every returning troop that comes home to indicate our appreciation. I asked the president, would he support something like that if he is so determined to salute the troops and to mention that anything else would denigrate their work? Well then, Mr. President, I'm asking you to celebrate the Military Success Act of 2007, not the politicians, but the military guys on the ground, guys and gals on the ground that have worked so hard to do what you've asked them to do. It's time to bring them home, thank them, celebrate them, hand them a check, and help them get back.
You say this is going to be vetoed. So what do you do when it gets vetoed? Is there going to be enough to override a veto on this?
We are pressing the envelope that we are bound to no compromise, that we will not pull back on what we have demanded of the president. This is the people's house. This is the place where people go for refuge if there is no commander-in-chief that seems to understand that he or she represents all of the people of the United States. My position is no compromise. And where we stand at that is that we are at loggerheads, if you will. We're blocking up against each other, but the American people will have to understand that this fight is not going to be over unless we stand our ground. Our intention is to send this bill forward, and if he desires to veto his money for troops redeploying or protecting them, then it's on the president that he has denied those troops the right to be protected as they redeploy out to the United States.
So what you're saying is what Harry Reid said, that he will not send any money to the president without timetables for withdrawal. Is the Congress going to stick by that?
We're holding ourselves to that. I pray to God that each of us will have the moral conviction to stand with those troops who are suffering, those amputees who are coming home, those families whose lives have been turned upside down, those young babies who are the babies of the young soldiers coming back, mothers and fathers. I hope we'll stand with the American people.
Following an expected presidential veto, the question will be how many Democrats will hold true to their convictions on not sending any money to Iraq. This has been Geoff Millard reporting from Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C.